Think about the best leader you have ever worked with. What made that person different? I bet it had nothing to do with any strategy or their credentials. And it had everything to do with the fact that they treated everybody with decency and respect, regardless of their role. Companies spend millions on leadership development. Books, seminars, certification programs that take weeks to complete. But leadership doesn't fail because we don't know enough. Leadership fails because we bury simple human truths under complex theories. Come on, let's admit it. We all know how to take something simple and make it complicated. The leadership industry is predicated on that. It makes them a lot of money. And it took me a while to figure that out. My journey started as I paid my way through university as a carpenter. I framed houses. I finished porches. I built decks. Got things done. No theories, no fancy titles. Just people working together for a common goal. Simple. Then I graduated. I put on a suit. I went to work for a bank. I thought leadership was different there. After all, they do have hierarchies and lots of titles. I thought leadership meant having all the answers, making every decision, being in charge. I tested that theory 2 weeks into the job. Team meeting, laid out a set of procedures I wanted to implement. When two seasoned employees who had been there probably as long as I had been alive at that point, questioned those ideas in front of everybody. The room went silent. Everybody looked at me. I looked at them. And I realized, because I said so, wasn't going to work. Authority based solely on position does not command respect. It has to be earned through trust. It was the beginning of my thinking, what do I really need to do to lead people and not just manage a process? It was the beginning of unlearning a lot of assumptions for me. A year or two later, I had an employee, Beth. Talented, great teammate, brilliant. And all of a sudden, her work started slipping. Missed deadlines, errors everywhere. That old instinct, the suit-wearing, authority-wielding instinct, he would have said, address the problem, document it, manage it. I had done some unlearning by then. Had a cup of coffee with her, asked, what's going on? She told me her father had suffered a stroke, and she'd been caring for him for the past 3 months and didn't want to say anything because she thought it would be seen as weakness. She thought that her caring for her family would be perceived by everybody else that she wasn't committed to her career. That moment required only 5 things from me. Compassion, to try to understand where she was coming from as opposed to reacting just to that performance. Curiosity, asking instead of assuming. Gratitude, letting her know exactly how important she was to the entire team. Humility, my recognizing that the old me would have totally handled that situation incorrectly. And kindness, being honest about expectations, but choosing to create space rather than pressure. Beth went on to become one of the most influential leaders that I've ever worked with. And I watched her bring that same candor and respect to her employees. That's how leadership multiplies, not through seminars, but by being human. And every time I tell that story, I am reminded of 2 very simple truths that we so often forget. Authority distances, humanity connects. Everything, every book, seminar, theory, framework on leadership is just a complicated way of saying leading with title pushes people away, and leading with dignity and respect brings them in close. Now, that's something I already knew as a carpenter. When you're building a house, you don't need a theory. You need a level, a square, and a plumb line. 3 tools, 1 purpose: keep the building true. And after more than 40 years, everything important I've ever learned about leadership fits on this 3x5 index card. Not because it's a cute prop in a TED Talk, but because it works. I have watched it build trust in banks, in boardrooms, and in a quiet conversation with someone who is uncomfortable asking for help. 3 qualities are foundational and required. Honesty. Not only telling the truth, but being accountable. And being open about your decisions, your reasoning, and your mistakes. People can handle hard news. They can't handle being misled. Clarity. Not what you think you said, but what people actually understand. Any confusion in the room, that's on the leader. And lastly, consistency. Being predictable in your behaviors and your values, regardless of the situation or who's in the room. That's the difference between a leader people trust and one they simply tolerate. But those 3 qualities only come alive through 5 behaviors that bring our humanity forward. The ones I needed with Beth: compassion, curiosity, gratitude, humility, and kindness. That's this whole card. I've seen it work in banks, in boardrooms, and in a quiet conversation with someone who is afraid, who is uncomfortable asking for help. Simple. But simple does not mean easy. Running is simple. Left foot, right foot. It's also exhausting. This card is simple, but acting on it every day, when deadlines are looming, budgets are being cut, and you're facing a crisis of monumental proportion, that takes discipline. That is the hard work of leadership. And the thing is, we already know this. We know because we know what it feels like with our work and our commitment when somebody treats us with dignity and respect. We always have. We just think it's more complicated than that. Think about the leader at the beginning of this. The one that showed you they were human. The one who valued you as you worked together towards a common goal. We can all do that. So here's my challenge for you. Pick one of those behaviors. Practice it intentionally tomorrow. Ask somebody a question instead of giving a directive. Thank someone for what they've done and admit something that you don't know and watch what happens to trust. That's the way we lead with humanity. And it's not learning some complex theory. It's about whether you're brave enough to be honest when it's hard, clear when it's easier to be vague, consistent in the crisis, whether you're willing to show up with compassion, curiosity, gratitude, humility, and kindness, especially when you're tired and stressed. That's how we lead with humanity. Ultimately, we are the complicated ones. Leadership isn't. It never was. Thank you.